I came back from the ridge at near dark, snow on my shoulders, my horse blowing hard, and the lodge was cold. Not the cold of a door left open, cold of a woman who had not moved in hours. My mother, sitting in her robes as though she was asleep, except she never slept sitting up. Shh. I touched her forehead and felt what I hoped I would not feel. The damp burning underneath the skin, that means the sickness has gone deep. That kind of fever doesn't cool, it takes. I built the fire, I went for clean snow to melt. I did all the things I knew to do, but there is a knowing that is different from a fixing. And I knew by the second night that what I had was not enough. My name does not translate well into English. It means something like the one who waits at the edge of things. My father's joke, he said, because I came into the world slowly and looked at it a long time before I cried. I had led my band for 11 years by then. I knew where the elk ran in winter, which creeks dried in August, where a man could find shelter in a 3-day storm. I knew how to speak to the Indian agent without letting him take anything. I knew how to keep 37 people fed in a hard year. I did not know how to cool a fever that had settled in the chest and turned each breath to gravel. My medicine man walks in rain, 3 days' ride east at his daughter's winter camp. The nearest white town was a place called Coulter's Fork, 14 miles down the valley, a collection of wind-scoured buildings and men who mostly looked through me when I came to trade. The doctor there was a drunk. I'd seen him. There was a woman who sometimes helped with birthing, a widow named Carlson. But I had no reason to think she would come out into a January night, for a Lakota woman she'd never met. I went anyway, left my cousin Spotted Elk to sit with my mother, rode into Coulter's Fork in the dark. The widow Carlson was not home. What I found instead was a light in the back of the livery, not the lantern of a stableman, a brighter thing, held still in the hayloft, and a voice, before I even called out, a woman's voice, steady and low. I have a rifle and I know how to use it, so say what you want before you come in. I said what I wanted. A silence. Then the light moved. She came down the ladder with a satchel over her shoulder. Young, younger than I expected from a voice that flat. Dark hair loose under a wool scarf. She was wearing a dress that was wrong for the weather, city fabric, black with small white flowers, the hem torn and muddy. She'd been in the livery some hours. Her hands when she held the lantern up to look at me were steady, but the knuckles were red from the cold. She said, "Your mother." I said yes. She said, "How long has she had the fever?" I told her. She looked at me a moment longer, not afraid, more like she was measuring something. Then she said, "I'll need my bag from Carlson's and I'll need a horse." I said, "You're not Carlson," she said. "No, but I trained under a doctor in St. Louis for 2 years before I." She stopped. Started again. "I know fevers. I know what to do for the chest. Whether you trust me is your decision to make, but make it fast because your mother has been sick since morning." I gave her my horse. She gave me the one she'd apparently taken from whoever she was running from. A good bay gelding, well-fed, better than anything I owned. We rode out into the dark. I will tell you what she did not ask. She did not ask who my people were, or how many, or whether we were dangerous. She did not ask why I had come to a white town instead of using my own medicine. She did not ask where I was taking her, or whether she would be safe. What she asked, riding at a hard trot through 6 inches of snow with a wind coming off the ridge, was, "Has she eaten today? What is her breathing like, fast or slow and shallow? Any rash on the skin? Has she coughed anything up? Who else in the camp has been sick?" Answered, "Each one." She listened, with her head slightly down, the way a person listens when they are building something in their mind from what they hear. By the time we reached the camp, she knew more about my mother's condition than I did. I have seen Spotted Elk, who was a grown man, veteran of 2 winters that nearly killed the whole band, go white, and step back when a stranger rode in unexpected at night. He held his ground, but I saw his hand go to his belt. The woman rode past him like she hadn't noticed, dismounted before I could help her, pulled her bag off the saddle, pushed through the lodge flap without being told to. I heard her voice from inside, low and quick, and I heard my mother say something, which meant my mother was conscious, which was more than I had hoped for when I left. I stood outside the lodge in the cold for a while. Spotted Elk stood beside me. He did not say anything. After a time he went and came back with a bowl of meat broth, and I drank it without tasting it. 2 hours. 3. The wind came up and the temperature dropped, and the camp was quiet, except for the horses moving in their sleep, and the occasional voice from inside. My mother's lodge, the woman's voice, asking something, and my mother answering. And then a silence that was a working kind of silence, not an empty one. Near midnight she came out. She stood in the cold and looked at the sky a moment. The particular look of someone who has been inside a small space doing something hard and needs to breathe. And then she said, "The fever broke a half hour ago. Her breathing is clearer. She'll sleep through the night, and she'll be weak for some days. But I don't think she'll get worse." I stood there. I had words, but they didn't come in the right order. She said, "You should sleep. Someone should sit with her, but it doesn't have to be you all night." I said, "Where will you sleep?" She looked at me. A brief look, not unkind, but it landed on something. I hadn't thought about that. I gave her my lodge. She stayed 3 days, which was what she said my mother needed. On the first day, she slept late and I did not wake her. On the second Shun day, she sat with my mother most of the morning, and in the afternoon she walked the edge of the camp slowly, looking at things. The horses, the drying racks, the construction of the lodges, in the way a person looks when they are trying to understand something, not judge it. On the third day she helped my cousin's wife, Little Drum, with a child who had an ear sickness. I don't know how she knew. The child had been fussy for a week, and we'd thought it was teething. The woman looked in the ear, heated some oil over the fire, tilted the child's head. The child slept the whole next day peaceful. I watched her work. That is not quite right. I went about my business, and she happened often to be in my line of sight. There is a difference. On the evening of the third day, I was mending a piece of harness outside, and she came and sat near the fire I had going. Not too close. Time neither of us said anything. She said, "I should go." I said, "Where?" She was quiet. I said, "The man you were running from. Is he the kind who stops looking?" "No, the law." "He is the law in that town, or near enough." I turned that over. I kept working the harness. I said, "If you go back through Coulter's Fork, you'll be seen. If you go south, you'll hit his county by spring." She said, "I know." I said, "We'd go north." She said, "I don't know anyone north." I said, "You do now." She looked at me. The fire between us and the dark coming on hard from the ridge, and the camp sounds around us. A child somewhere, a dog, the low talk of men at another fire. She looked at me for a long time and I did not look away. She said, "That's a hard life." I said, "It is." She said, "Your people don't know me." I said, "They know what you did for my mother." Another silence. She turned and looked at the lodge where my mother was sleeping. Then she looked back at me. She said, "I don't know your language." I said, "I know. You'll learn." I want to tell you it was easy from there. It was not. There were men in the band who thought I'd lost my sense, taking in a white woman who'd arrived in the dark trailing trouble. There was one in particular, a man named Two Crows, who had reasons older than me. Distrust white people, good reasons, reasons I respected, who said to my face that I was making a mistake I couldn't unmake. I listened to him. I didn't change my mind, but I listened, and I thanked him for saying it plain. She learned. That was the thing. She did not come in and try to show us a better way to do anything. She watched. She made mistakes, and then she stopped making them. She learned the word for water, for cold, for fire, for pass me that, for I'm sorry, for I don't understand, and she used the last one honestly, which mattered. Little Drum liked her by the end of the first month. That meant something. She healed 4 people that winter. Nothing dramatic. A man's hand that had gone bad around a cut. A woman who couldn't keep food down after her baby came. 2 children with the coughing sickness that swept through in February. She did not make a practice of it. did not set herself up as the camp doctor. Someone needed something she knew how to do, she did it. My mother called her Winyan Waste. Good woman. Not to her face at first. Just to me, quietly, one morning. The man who'd been looking for her came in April. He came with a deputy and a story about a stolen horse, the bay gelding she, ridden out of Coulter's Fork. And he came to our camp like he had a right to walk through any door he chose. He was soft in the way that powerful men who've never been tested are soft, that particular softness that lives behind a badge and a voice that's always been listened to. I stood between him and the lodge where she was. He told me what he was there for. He was polite about it, the way a man is polite when he thinks the pleasantries are a formality before he gets what he wants. I said, the woman he was describing wasn't here. He said he had reason to think otherwise. I said, you're on Lakota land and you came without asking. Say what you have to say and then go the way you came. His deputy put his hand on his sidearm. I did not move. I did not look at the deputy. I kept looking at the man with the badge. There is something that happens when a man is prepared to die for a thing, and another man is not. You can feel it. Changes the temperature of the conversation. He felt it. He took his time about it. Men like him always take their time. It's the one power they have left. But after a while, he turned his horse around. His deputy went with him. She was standing in the lodge doorway when I turned around. She said, you didn't have to do that. I said, I know. She said, come back with more men. I said, probably. She said, you're not afraid of that. I looked at her. I said, not about this. He did not come back. I don't know why. Whether he decided the horse wasn't worth it, or the paperwork, or whether somewhere in what happened on that April morning he'd understood something about how it would go if he tried. I'll never know, and I stopped wondering about it after a while. What I know is that summer came and she was still here. And the summer after that. My mother was the one who spoke about it first. She was like that. She'd wait and watch for as long as she thought she needed to. Then she'd say the thing that had been sitting in the room unspoken. She called me to sit with her, one evening in late summer, the good summer smell coming through the lodge. And she said, in Lakota, so I'm giving you the sense of it, not the words. That woman looks at you the way your father used to look at me. I said I didn't know what she was talking about. She gave me the look she had been giving me since I was 4 years old. I said, she has her own life to figure out. My mother said, she has figured it out. She's waiting for you to figure it out. I sat with that for a while. My mother sat with me, patient she could be when she wanted to. I said, she's not Lakota. My mother said no. She's what she is, and what she is has been good for us. I went to her that evening. She was outside her lodge. She had her own lodge now, which she had helped build, which she was proud of. Sorting through her medical things in the last of the light. Laying out the dried plants she'd been collecting all season, learning their names from walks in rain, cross-referencing them with whatever she carried in her head from St. Louis. I sat down near her. She did not look up, but she knew I was there. I said, my mother thinks you're waiting for me to say something. She said, still sorting, your mother is a smart woman, I said. Are you? She stopped what she was doing. She looked at me, direct. The way she'd looked at me the first night in the livery, when she was deciding whether to trust a Lakota man who'd ridden out of the dark. That same measurement. She said, I'm not a girl who needs rescuing, if that's what you're asking. I said, I know that. Known that since the first night, she said. And I'm not going anywhere. I said, I know that too. She said, so what are you asking? I said, I'm asking if what I think is happening between us is what you think is happening. She looked at me for a long moment in that late summer light. The hills gold behind her, the smoke from the cook fires, horses moving at the far edge of the camp, and then she did something I hadn't expected. She reached over and took my hand, both of hers around one of mine, the way you hold something you mean to keep. She said, yes, just that. We were married in October, in the Lakota way, which she had asked about, and understood and chose freely. My mother wrapped us in one blanket and said the words that needed saying, and walks in rain made the smoke and two crows, who had told me I was making a mistake, stood at the edge and watched and did not leave, which was the only blessing I needed from him. That night she said to me, "For a life that was going to be built for me by someone who'd never asked what I wanted." I said, "What did you want?" She said, "I didn't know until I found it." I said, "What is it?" She was quiet a moment. Outside the lodge, the first cold wind of the season was moving through the camp, and the fire was low and steady, and somewhere my mother was laughing at something. She laughed more that year than I'd heard in a long time. She said, "To be useful, to be somewhere real, to be with a man who stands his ground and doesn't ask me to be smaller than I am." I held that, she said. "Is that enough of an answer?" I said, "It's enough." She healed a lot of people over the years. Some of them came from Coulter's Fork eventually. Not at first, not for a long time, eventually. Word traveling the way word does in empty country. That there was a woman in the Lakota camp who knew what to do with a wound or a sickness or a difficult birth. I did not make it easy for those men to come. I made them ask properly. I made them understand they were guests. She never said anything about that, but I saw her trying not to smile. The first time, a man from Coulter's Fork stood at the edge of the camp and waited to be invited in. My mother lived 7 more winters. She died in the spring of the year our daughter was born, which my wife said was not a coincidence, that a soul going out makes room for one coming in. I don't know if I believe that. But it was a comfort, and I let it be a comfort. There was a morning. This is what I come back to. A morning in the 3rd or 4th winter, early. The land, still blue dark in the snow unbroken around the camp. I was standing outside seeing to the horses, and she came out and stood beside me, breath in the cold, wrapped in the elk robe she'd earned herself. We stood looking at the hills, as she said. "It's beautiful here." I said, "It is." She said, "I used to think I'd end up in a city somewhere." I said, "Do you miss it? The idea of it?" She thought about it honestly. She always did. Then she said, "No. I think I was always meant for something that cost something to get to." I didn't say anything. The horses moved. The light came up over the ridge, slow and enormous, the way it does in winter when the whole world is white and the sky turns. Colors you don't have names for. Her shoulder against my arm. That's all. That's the whole of it.